Leave fossil fuels in the ground. Get up, get down. Fossil fuels in the ground. Get down. How you doing? Hi. We're going to stay on the grass. All right. So welcome to the Army Corps of Engineers office. Woo! Now, we know why we're here. A year ago, they got all their permits, started building Line 3, and we started actions to try to close down Line 3. We have a letter for them today, and we certainly hope they will come and collect it. Okay, want to get the letter? Amanda, do you have it? Jim has it?
Yeah.
This gent says he'll run it up. Thank you. Dominique Chacon. He's an organizer for Community Action Works. How many of you know Community Action Works? Woo, 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 woo. They've been incredibly active helping us in Peabody trying to stop a gas and oil peaker plant. It is a great organization. And here is one of their primary organizers. Before joining Community Action Works, Dominique was an activist in organizing on the U.S.-Mexican border. He worked with low-income folks, Latinx, Native communities. He studied environmental science at the University of Texas, El Paso, worked on environmental campaigns and the intersectionality of education, immigration, and economic justice. He's coordinated a lot of mutual aid efforts for immigrants. He's led a lot of direct action to stop gentrification. Dominique brings a diverse perspective of fierce compassion in collective struggles for mutual liberation.
Hello, everybody. Thank you all for having me here and for being out here to show solidarity with Line 3 action. It's really important that you all are here and that you all are making your presence known. As I got introduced really wonderfully, my name is Dominique Chacon. I am not originally from here in Massachusetts. I'm from El Paso, Texas, on the border with U.S. and Mexico. I am Native American. I identify as what's called a Chicano, which is somebody who's of Native American descent that used to be territory belonging to Mexico but is now part of the U.S. And Chicano is a name used to reclaim our own identity. It's the name we want to be called for ourselves, you know? As was formerly mentioned, I studied environmental science with a concentration in biology at the university there. And my hope studying was so that I could become part of the solution, at least in the science path, towards determining what we need to do for climate change and how we need to stop this and reverse it. And in my studies, I learned that it's not a matter of not knowing the problem, it's a matter of not wanting to do anything about it. And so in my experience, in my journey organizing and doing activism, I have learned that all of these problems are interconnected by many different things. One of the main things being capitalism. And we need to make sure that we are uttering capitalism every time we talk about not just Line 3, but all environmental injustices all throughout our region. If we are not saying capitalism is the problem, then we are only selling our own movement short. We're only kneecapping what the real problem is. Because administration after administration, Democrat or Republican, the same is true. It's always an excuse for 101 things not to do, 101 ways in which things won't work out, rather than finding one way in which it will. And so part of what capitalism does is just what's happening in Line 3. It says so long as you can make $1, so long as you can make a profit, it doesn't matter what you destroy. It doesn't matter which people you destroy. It doesn't matter who you hurt, so long as you make $1, so long as you make $1 under capitalism. And coming from Texas, it's a very, very different place. Our enemies are clear, right? Ted Cruz is clear as day as who he hates and why he hates it. But coming out here, the enemy is a little more secretive, right? The people who say are our allies are not always acting as our allies. And so we need to look deep within ourselves and ask ourselves, who is deceiving us? Because that inhibits the work, that inhibits the organizing. We are in a really precious moment in our history, not as just a nation, but as a country and as a people, as humans. We don't have a lot of time to change what we've been doing here. And the longer we wait, the more vulnerable people hurt and get stuck with the consequences. And not only are these people dealing with the consequence, they're sort of the scapegoat for all of us dealing with that consequence. When we make trash, let's say, do we keep our trash? Do we keep it in our home? Do we make sure that we're responsible for the waste that we produce and that we consume? We don't. It has been our cultural norm, our society norm, to push off all of the bad impacts onto Black, Indigenous, women, poor communities, and that just is the trend. And so we need to be really strong and reflective about what we can do here as individuals, specifically out here in Massachusetts. So when I come out here and when I see all of you, I am very grateful for the time and the effort you all have taken to come out here. And I feel kind of guilty asking, but I want more. We can do more. We have to do more. It's not good enough for us to walk away from here feeling good about ourselves, right? Not that we should not feel proud of what we have accomplished and the new people we have met and the networks we have built, but we must be hard on ourselves to realize that we are in a privileged position, an extremely privileged position, to be able to be here in the cold, to have the finances to skip a day of work if you have to have childcare for you to come out here. We all hold privilege here, and we must weaponize that privilege. And when I say weaponize, I don't mean pull out your guns like in Texas and do all that stuff. What I mean is weaponize it in a really different way. We can use force in numbers. We can use force in people power. We can use force in economic leverage, and that is a power that I see coming away from here, coming outside. That's the power I see us having here in Massachusetts. We have so much leverage. We have so many people who are willing to hold the democratic lens and the progressive lens, but are not willing to act on it. So we need to be asking ourselves, what more can we do to light the fire? How can we get people like, what was that lady we went to her house to deliver that letter? Gina McCarthy. She was saying quite clearly that she was against Line 3. Yet all of a sudden, when she gets into power, nothing, right? How many times has that happened before today? And how many times are we going to let it happen in the future? We need to stop that. We need to break the cycle. And each and every single one of you as individuals has a network, has leverage, has power, has people that you know in the Army, in the Air Force, in government. I need you to talk to them and agitate them, okay? I need you to talk to them, not that they're lower than you or that you have something to power over them, but because you see them as playing a critical role towards all of our liberation. And that's what we must be thinking about. And that's what I encourage every single one of you all to do. Line 3 is just another Dakota Access pipeline. And even if we were to get exactly what we asked for from these people who clearly are committed to misunderstanding, are committed to not listening to us, even if we were to convince them today, the problem would still exist. The problem is capitalism. The problem is racism. And the two cannot live without each other. Racism cannot live without capitalism, and capitalism cannot survive without racism. So we need to internally and externally address those things in radical ways, in very radical ways. And so I'm very grateful to be here and to share a little bit of my insight as an Indigenous person, as a two-spirited person, and as an environmental organizer. My heart breaks for the future. It really does. My heart breaks for all the young people who have to give up on their dreams, not because they want to, but because we all must, at one point or another, address the elephant in the room and address what is burning right in front of our eyes. And so, I just ask you to look within yourselves and ask yourselves, what leverage do I have? How can I fight with every ounce of my being and my spirit and my body to try to make the future a little bit better, not to fix it, because unfortunately we won't, but hopefully so that we can set the stage for future organizers to have a fighting chance. A fighting chance is what we're looking for. And so please, weaponize your privilege. Look in the mirror, talk to yourself for 10 minutes, and then find somebody that you know you can use that leverage and talk to them as well. Okay? Thank you so much for being out here. I really encourage you all to keep doing this and keep the work, keep the spirit up, and thank you so much for having me.
A better future, and we need to start right now. Yes. We need to rise up. We need to open our eyes and do it now. We need to build a better future, and we need to start right now.
Anna Goldman. Make your way up. Anna is, as you'll guess from her jacket, a primary care doc. She's also a health service researcher at Boston Medical Center. And she looks very much at the effects of how our insurance affects especially elder people with less economic power. Boy, we know about that. She's a recipient of the Lipton Award and a member of Climate Code Blue, which is a group of physician activists who understand the climate crisis and how it is urgently linked to human health. She received a medical degree at Mount Sinai, a master's in public health from Harvard, master's in public health from Harvard, and another one from Brown. This woman is heavily degreed. And she just wrote a fabulous article with Philip Landegren in Commonwealth Magazine. Every electron is not neutral.
Gordon and Welly.
You guys want to come over and listen to us? Okay. Oh, okay. Awesome. You just want to know. You're welcome if you want to come. Okay. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to speak to you today. So thank you for the introduction. My degrees are basically meaningless in all of this, what we're doing here today. We're here just as people together.
Yeah, that's better.
So as Amanda and Judith mentioned, I'm a primary care doctor at Boston Medical Center. I'm also the mother of 2 young kids. I'm so happy to see some kids here today. I came here to support this effort because investing in new fossil fuel infrastructure is dangerous for the health of my patients and for the health of children everywhere. The negative effects of burning fossil fuels are abundantly clear. In my work as a primary care doctor, every day I care for patients who suffer the consequences of pollution from burning dirty fossil fuels. Air pollution, and specifically the particulate matter that comes from cars and trucks and power plants, cause high rates of asthma and other lung diseases, and those particularly affect poorer communities. But that particulate matter also causes health problems that are less obvious. We know that particulate matter and nitrous oxide enter the blood vessels and damage those blood vessels. It causes greater risks of heart attack and stroke and other cardiovascular diseases. We know that tiny particles from air pollution cross the blood-brain barrier and lead to dementia, increased risk of Alzheimer's, and actually children who are exposed to higher levels of air pollution when they are babies and toddlers are at higher risk of autism, and that also is true for mothers who are exposed in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy, their children are at higher risk for autism. So we understand with frightening clarity that burning fossil fuels is toxic to our bodies and to our environment. And the health effects I just discussed are here with us today. We're all living with them. The health effects of continuing to burn fossil fuels will be the deaths of billions of people caused by a changing climate. So I want to speak directly to the members of the Army Corps of Engineers today. The Corps' mission is to secure our nation and reduce the risk of disaster. So you are a group of elite scientists who fully understand and appreciate the national security risks posed by climate change.
Yes.
What we ask of you today is straightforward. We ask that you conduct an environmental impact statement, known as an EIS. The National Environmental Policy Act requires an EIS to be done for all major projects that require federal permits. Line 3 certainly qualifies, and yet the Corps has not done an EIS. We would like the Army Corps of Engineers to step up and do this assessment, including an assessment of potential oil spills, climate risks, and impacts on Indigenous peoples and their land. The Army Corps of Engineers has had a difficult history in its dealing with Indigenous peoples. At many points in the Corps' history, it has not respected the rights of Indigenous people or supported their interests. But it doesn't have to be this way forever. The Corps has an opportunity to change its relationship to Indigenous people over time. The Corps has an opportunity to be stewards of the environment and protect the public's interest.
Here, here.
I ask the Corps to do this environmental impact statement. Do it for the tribes who are affected by the Line 3 pipeline. Do it for all Americans, for our health and our future.
Fossil free, think about your legacy. Fossil fuel or fossil free, think about your legacy. Fossil fuel or fossil free, think about your legacy. Fossil fuel or fossil free, think about your legacy. Yeah, we've been hearing a lot about particulate matter as we study the peaker plant, the potential peaker plant, and what that does, and that you don't see it. It enters your lungs and then into your bloodstream and is just devastating. All right, we have one more very honorable speaker. Jeanluc Perez. He's from a much warmer place than this, New Orleans, Louisiana. He's a member of the Tunica Bellucci tribe. He holds a BA in Humanities and had a co-major in Mass Communication, and he was elected to a seat on CoLang, which is an institute for collaborative language research. And the person that led him there was his great-grandfather, Joseph. He was the last traditional chief and medicine man of the Tunica Bellucci. He serves as president of the North American Indian Center of Boston, Massachusetts, the oldest Indian center which has been providing cultural and social services for New England Native communities for over 50 years, and we are really blessed to have him here.
So as is our practice at the North American Indian Center of Boston, before we speak, we want to it is our duty to recognize the land that we are standing on, the land that holds us, the land that sustains us. And here in closer to central Massachusetts, western Massachusetts, we recognize this land as traditional indigenous territory of Nipmuc Nation, who continue to this day in part through their lineal descendants, Chobonagungamug, a band of Nipmuc Indians, Nipmuc Nation, and all the peoples throughout central Massachusetts going into Connecticut. And why do we recognize the land? We recognize the land because we are making agreements with our host tribes. And one such agreement is to support every effort by the tribes for the repatriation of land and natural resources back to the original peoples. So I want you to join with me in that agreement today. I want you to affirm to improve your relationships with the Nipmuc people, with the Wampanoag people, with the Abenaki, with the Massachusetts, with all of the peoples across the confederacies that have had government-to-government relationships with the so-called Massachusetts, Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Bay Colony, the province of Massachusetts, all of those different tribes throughout New England. Educate yourselves on whose land you are standing on and who do you need to have relationships with today. Yeah, so my name is Jeanluc Perez. I'm originally from New Orleans. And as president of the North American Indian Center of Boston, we do provide cultural and social services to the New England Native American community. But also, what does that mean here locally? What does that mean for the issues that we're discussing, the history that we're discussing? Because you can go out to Minnesota, you can talk to the Anishinaabe, and you can say that you're from Massachusetts, and they will say, oh, we have relations out there in Massachusetts because we're connected. We're connected by our languages, we're connected by blood, we're connected by the waters. I see this banner here, Enbridge committing ecocide. All of the pollution that is going into the headwaters of the Mississippi River, how that goes down the river into my own home territory of Louisiana, and it impacts those communities there. But then also thinking about protections for the Gulf of Mexico, for which the Mississippi River runs into. The Gulf of Mexico, which had millions of acres auctioned off after President Biden returned from COP26. What does that say? What does that say about this administration's priorities for improving relationships with Indigenous peoples here in the so-called United States? What does that say for the Army Corps of Engineers, which has to take the lead from that administration? What does that say for all of us? It is our duty to press upon this federal government to improve relationships with Indigenous nations and to fully honor the treaties. Yes. And so that is why we are here today calling for an environmental impact statement, not just that acknowledges, you know, the local governments, state governments, but tribal governments as well. Where is the tribal consultation data in those environmental impact statements? How are the tribes included in all of these processes? How is the concern for the wild rice and the lifeways of the Anishinaabe people? How are they considered? How are we even included in all of this? And let me just say, consultation does not equal consent, because we need free, prior, and informed consent before anything happens on our lands. Exactly. You know, I was sitting here and I was kind of remarking on how our friends here, you know, they're very kindly reminding us not to step on the property. Yeah. But how does the Army Corps of Engineers tell Enbridge, stay off of tribal lands? The diligence that we are experiencing today is the same diligence that needs to be scaled up, and we need our lands protected, we need our waters protected, and more. Because the traditional knowledge of Indigenous peoples is the solution, the real solution. Not talking about carbon markets or net zero, but the real solution is going to come from the people. It is going to come from the women and the children that have paid for this fight for so long. Talking about missing and murdered Indigenous women, talking about all of the children that we lost to residential and boarding schools, just for the simple right of speaking their own languages and affirming the knowledge that they learned in the homes. And so for all of those people, all of the lands, all of the non-humans that we are standing here for, let us affirm our agreements with our host tribes, and again, press upon this federal government to fully honor and respect the rights of the Indigenous peoples. Yes. And the treaties. Thank you. Thank you. Keisha here has a brief offering. I'm going to give the floor to you.
Yeah, sure.
My name is Keisha, or Talking Waters. I'm Rempo Lenape Muncie Minisink. So my tribal land is all of that from Philly into what we now call Toronto, even a little bit further actually, because we had what was known as the Walking Treaty. So wherever we walked, in theory, for the Dutch purchase of New York and New Jersey is where we call home. Wyoming was actually named after the Lenape. So all of Turtle Island is home. All of these nations are cousins. The Anishinaabe used to be people of the first light, and they made their journey long before some of us. They took the wild rice with them. So I went home in a lot of ways to check on family. And I went home this summer, and I stayed at Shell City Campground. And then I went back a few weeks ago, actually, for Takesgiving. And I decided to bring back some of the frack out water from Firelight, some of the frack out water from Red Lake, Willow River, which was the infamous frack out of Enbridge that the Army Corps also was aware of and decided not to tell the public, where we had water protectors directly standing in the water in the midst of the frack out, some of whom were in the midst of getting in their canoes, moving their horses away from active frack out water. I have some of that water and some of that soil here today if anybody wants to look at it. Myself and a few other people with science backgrounds, political as well as just citizen science, we've gone about it as ourselves to make baselines for all of these ecocides. There is no baseline for DAPL. There was no baseline of the Mississippi. I actually don't know, none of us know, even the Army Corps doesn't know what the pH of the Mississippi was before Enbridge. That's a basic measurement. Women, we know this. That's a basic measurement. And we don't know what that was for the Mississippi River, something that wasn't found until Abraham Lincoln. For what this country considers itself to be, that's a weak blow. So I just share that because myself and a few other friends of mine, even over the border, we're going to bring it back to Canada, and we're going to use some of our institutional power over the border to test in a school lab, in a university lab, as well as literally take back some of their trash there. So the same way Ron Turney of Honor the Earth was able to bring some of that water in DC and literally put it on the Army Corps, at least here, for those of you who haven't been able to see the Mississippi. Unfortunately, I brought some of the damage for you to see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No pipelines, no tar sands, no taking native lands. No pipelines, no tar sands, no taking native lands. No pipelines, no tar sands, no taking native lands. No pipelines, no tar sands, no taking native lands. No pipelines, no tar sands, no taking native lands. So I mentioned already that a year ago today is the anniversary of the start of the construction and the start of the protests. In November of last year, 12 out of 17 members of a group that was advising the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency on environmental justice issues resigned in protest because the agency approved key water quality permits. And those people included Winona LaDuke, Zeke McKinney, and some very, very significant people who've been working on this. The Republican-controlled Minnesota Senate ousted the governor's commerce commissioner after his agency appealed to the Public Utilities Commission's approval of the project. And how human health and safety has become so politicized is utterly an abomination. Okay, you'll love this one. Apples ain't oranges. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, MPEC, their commissioner, her name is Laura Bishop, and she acknowledged the concerns. She said, well, I've heard from countless Minnesotans that the MPCA should deny this certificate because of climate change. And that's why my committee is spearheading an effort to make more electric vehicles. Hello, shoot me. Okay. Now that Line 3 is expanded, Enbridge is actually looking to increase its capacity across the entire fossil fuel infrastructure. There's a system that's going to connect to the Texas Gulf Coast, including potentially building a pipeline linking the Houston area to its newly acquired crude export hub at the port of Corpus Christi. Enbridge is also looking at ways to expand its capacity across its Southern Access Extension and Flanagan South pipelines. Oh yeah, and in terms of Line 3, Enbridge has already been fined millions and is under criminal investigation for aquifer breach, which is exactly what we've just heard of. So we're here renewing our call for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to order federal environmental impact statement. The need has reached an emergency level. All right, time to sing. Siren sounds, trees are budding, leave the town, it is flooding. It's the 5th time around, your neighbor has drowned. Climate change is claiming your home. If you live in a valley, if you live in a river, if you live on a coast, you better not boast. Climate change will claim your only home. In the summer you can build a snowman. In the winter do some surfing, dude. In the spring a frost will be your foeman. The core will die and there will be no food. If you live on an island, if you live near a forest, if you live on a farm, a cesspit farm, climate change will claim your only home. Last verse. You can carve and sequester, build a new fortress or tester. But if drilling don't stop, carbon levels won't drop. The climate change will claim our only home. Oh, one more time. Climate change will claim our only home.
It's a mixture of things. This was one of the first undisclosed fractures that we were aware of. So this was at the East Eastman or Camp Firelight, if you were able to make it out to Minnesota. It's about maybe half a mile from on Google Maps what's called Coffee Pot Landing. And this happened what we estimate to be early July. It was collected in October though, right before the DC action. And then Ron Turney, when I met up with him in Minnesota recently, he was able to share some with me.
We're going to cross back down the street and head on that way.
The iron,
unless these guys
it was a color reactant iron test. So a 1 is normal for water. It's a very pale orange. This ended up coming out at about like off the charts orange, almost the color of their mask right there, orange. So at a minimum, it's safe to say that the iron is abnormally high, which for humans would kill us. So well systems nearby, and this frack out is very close to wild rice beds. And then most of what I have right now, just because it was easier, I have children, it was easier to bring are some of the soil samples. This though is the drill mud from the July 20th East Eastman frack out for Firelight, and this is super significant because only 17 additives were announced to be used, 2 of which were made public, and that's Polypack and Sandmaster, which together kind of make a cement, so when they're literally penetrating the earth, it doesn't collapse. However, those 2 combined, it is internationally illegal to use near waterways, and on top of that, they're combustible when together. And I guess like in terms of the significance, I did my master's in international law. This is something, for example, like Jody Williams, aside from landmines, was like, yeah, maybe we next go to this. So even Steve Dogner in jail right now, like everything that was used alone as like chemicals or technology itself is illegal, let alone the process of actually without prior informed consent building a pipeline. I just share that because with soil, it's dangerous, right? So I flew these things back, which was dangerous within itself for sure.
And were you with like a team of people collecting stuff? Or
no, so I work for Earthwatch out of Boston, and so my personal background is I think we need scientists on the front lines, right? Like at what point does citizen science work? When do we flip it? We need scientists for citizens. Yeah. And I think for Native people, if they're not going to give us examples of free, prior informed consent, we need to do it for ourselves. Yeah. So myself, Guy Waden, he's been very popular on TikTok. He's a 19-year-old Two-Spirit, Anishinaabe, Chippewa. So we met up, we worked together on it.
There's plenty of
yeah.
parking lot. So was this done secretly or was it done like they didn't want anything to know about it?
So it's a trade secret. they've designed their own temporary cement when they drill pipelines. So the only reason why those additives won't be made public is because they own the same way Monsanto will tell you what's really in corn. But the true issue is that the combination of them is fine, they're trade secret, but the individual products we should be able to know, but they only told us about the two that are internationally illegal, which I see as come get me and they know no one. That's beyond a slap in the face. And it's the same way dropping the atomic bomb on the Navajo is a slap in the face.
Yeah.
Yes, so these are other, everything in here is soil samples. That was the most drastic. I have a few other soil samples from the Willow River frack out. That was the one people were standing in, as well as across the street from the lodge Winona Leduc and Tanya Abud built, which is now, they're arguing should be an international spiritual site. So my goal is with all of these soil samples, I have a few friends at different universities throughout Canada. We're going to do it on the Enbridge side, and between the two, I mean, it's a whole continent of ecocide. Thank you. I'm not alone in it, thank goodness, but it's a lot for sure. Yes, I am.